Alright, audio is probably going to be shit, but anyway, sitting around, I'm watching a podcast, which is Eric talking to Jamie Metzl, primarily about genetic manipulation and whether or not, or rather not whether or not it's going to happen, because it's kind of inevitable that it's going to happen, or it's more about the kinds of conversations we need to have about it. Anyway, and I feel like the conversation appears to be primarily Eric trying to steer Jamie to think outside of the, I don't know, to see the holes or to see the gaps in his thinking, where it's like he's got this narrative and this structure and he's thinking in this direction, but he's skipping over pieces. And as far as I can tell, I mean, I don't know if he's doing it on purpose, but as far as I can tell, Eric's passively, in a very nice way, sort of trying to bring up those holes and being unable to do so. It's like Jamie's completely blind to them, which I would assume is normal for like people who get into conversations, is that they don't know what they don't know, right? So how do you get someone to think of for themselves? Because you're trying to overcome their defense mechanisms, which will naturally kick in if you tell them what it is. They'll go, no, I have an explanation. Everyone rationalizes their point of view, everyone, all the time. So it's like as if he's indirectly attempting to steer in a very smart way, because it's not obvious, to see the gaps in the conversation. And so the gaps as I see them are because the argument that's not being made, right, and this is the interesting part, it's about what's not said, is that if we get into a realm or a world that we become genetic, we engineer all of our genetics, the choices that we make end up being our limitation in comparison to what the universe is able to provide. What I mean by that is that even with the sum total of all human knowledge at your fingertips and your ability to know it instantaneously, you still don't know what you don't know. So the choices that you make are always going to be flawed in some sense, and which comes down to the end result of, and it's difficult for me to say this, is literally having faith in the universe, or in some circles it would be considered faith in God, that the outcome will be the outcome, and it's going to be good, and you treat each other good, and the outcome will be good. Because, I mean, if past history is anything to go by, we're still all alive. There's more of us than ever there was before. You know, like, if we continue to think on the good path, we've still got, you know, like, it's almost like what you see superheroes do is they don't know what the outcomes of their choices are, and they believe they're invincible because they always have been. You see that repeated in superhero movies all the time. And at some point, that just becomes naturally true for all of us anyway. I mean, as children, we don't really think about it, but the more information we get, the more information we realize we don't have, and that every day you go on faith that the world is still going to operate the same way that it did yesterday. I mean, the unprecedented times that we live in right now with COVID, even that, we all still have some variation of faith that, you know, the petrol will still flow, the groceries will still be delivered to the supermarkets, we'll still be able to operate, and as long as we all have that faith that everything keeps going, then we all can continue to trust and keep going, sort of thing. It's a very strange sort of state, but this Jamie's not really thinking about it in terms, he believes that we should definitely be making these choices, or at least figuring out how to make them safely, and the opposite argument to that, which is really interesting, because there's this constant sort of battle. It's not battle, it's a constant sort of like mental shifting between the two modes of, if we understand something, then we should definitely experiment with it and figure it out, and we'll, by doing that and our failures, figure out a way through. Some of us will obviously die from failures, but some of us will keep going, and that's always been how everything always works. And then faith that that's going to be okay, and not to do anything too quickly, or too widespread, because you would just fuck everyone, you know, like, I can't really put it into words exactly, maybe because my brain's not organized enough to be able to make it happen, but there's definitely something to do with faith in the future, and not just faith in that tomorrow will come, because I mean, like, we have generally that faith anyway. Like, what, we might not see the meteor till the last second, you know what I mean? Like, we don't see what we don't know. So and that, beyond the veil of knowledge, is like a strange place of opportunity, and to avoid that strange place of opportunity is the danger. And that's what I think is what I'm trying to think about. And by making choices, like all of our choices based on known facts, means you limit your opportunity, because you're not entering into the unknown. And that's the scary part, where you're choosing stagnation without knowing, thinking you're choosing progress. Yeah, that's, I don't know if that'll come across in the video, but it's fascinating listening to this discussion.